again. So I'm going to be processing an image from a recent workshop that I did, which was all about black and white photography. Now we shot all our images actually in black and white, but because I shoot RAW and my Lightroom import settings don't have, to keep the camera settings, it reverts it back to normal. I have my images in color. Now this is something I wanted to do because although I was shooting in black and white on the night, just to get an idea of the tones, I wanted to process my black and white manually so I could choose exactly what I want to do with the tones, the contrast, and the overall feel of the image. So to go over this image quite simply, it's a 3-light setup and it's a dance image. And we have a zoom spot on the background from a side just to create that slight stage lighting. We have a strip box adding that little bit of separation and a deep, I think it's deep 100 Elinchrom Brolly with a baffle on our key light up here just to create this pool of light coming in. And I'm shooting on a Colorama background that, quite honestly, I'm not sure I know the name of. I call it champagne, but I don't know the actual color. So what we're going to do, we're going to process this image through Lightroom, take it all the way through into Photoshop. I've got a couple of little issues. So my Colorama roll, as you might be able to see at the top, is on its last legs. It is at the end, but it was the perfect color for this shot. I couldn't go get a new roll, so we've used it anyway. So I've got a little bit of cleanup in the creases, a little bit of cleanup on the floor, though the floor's not too bad. It's more the top where it's just sort of creased a little bit. So we've got a little bit of that to do. I will be changing the composition of the image anyway. It's something I do with a lot of dance pictures. I will shoot quite tight-ish, as you can see, and then I will bring my composition out to where I want it to be. Now, I wouldn't do this with most other styles of photography. I will normally shoot exactly what I want, but for this one and for dance, I tend to add space. So there's no point just shooting negative space. I can add that on after and have the highest quality dancer image possible. So let's get into it. Let's have a look. Now I'm going to go into develop mode. And the thing is, I do want to control my tones with the black and whites. However, let's face it, there's nothing done to this image. It is what it is. It's pretty much black and white already. There's not very much to it. We've obviously got a bit of skin color and skin texture and things here as well, but really the image already is very monochromatic. There isn't very much to do. I am still going to whack it on the black and white setting and we can control it and play with that, but it's not going to be a drastic, wow, that's different kind of image on this particular one. So the first thing I always do is I play with my highlights, I play with my shadows. So I'm going to play with the highlights and I just see where they adjust. It's always something that I kind of know where it's going to hit, but it's good to have a look, see what's going to be adjusted and pull the shadow so you can see I can get a lot more detail if I come into here by pulling those shadows up. I can click the button right. So that's as shot and get a lot more detail in those shadows. Now I don't want all that. I just want to bring up a tiny little bit just to get a tiny bit more detail. I think the nib on my pen needs changing because it's just reacting like crazy at the moment. Then I'm going to go on to my crop and I'm just going to bring this down to here. Everything else is going to be edited and changed anyway, but there was no point keeping that top bit. And apart from that, I'm pretty happy. So I'm going to go down to my black and white mix here. And this is where we're going to have a little bit of a play. Now, as I said, this image is pretty much monochromatic as it is. So I can't imagine these are going to make a huge amount of difference. If I just grab green, for example, there's a few little bits being affected, but not really anything. Tiny bits of blue, not really much, but red's a little bit. Orange is always skin, so orange is always quite affected. So I might use that to bring the highlights up a little bit, but and yellow is going to be tints of the hair. So there's not very much to that at all. But I always have a play around with those just to kind of see what I can get. So firstly, I'm quite happy with that. I know that I'm going to do a lot of my work in Photoshop here. I do sometimes add color grading to my black and whites, but I'm going to be doing that in Photoshop for this particular image. So I'm going to right click, edit in Photoshop, and let's drag that over and see what we've got to play with. Oh, here we go. Okay, so first it wants me to do an update. We'll have to get around to that in a bit. It always asks you when you've got an image open, so you can't do it. Now, first thing I'm going to do is clear up any of the obvious. So my patch tool, I'm going around and I'm just using content aware just to clear up. It's going to be patchy, there's going to be bits, but I'm just getting out all the obvious stuff we will go and smooth that round after. You can use generative fill if you prefer. I find that, quite honestly, Content Aware does everything that I kind of need it to from here, so I don't worry too much. And generative fill still has a bit of blending texture issues as far as I'm concerned. There's a few things where I think you can tell it's been generative filled so far, so it will get there, it will catch up with us. Okay, so let's create on here. Now all I'm doing is going around smoothing out a few of these lines. Anything big and bold, we're just smoothing out a bit. And we'll come back to the floor. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate my layer with Control and J. I'm going to hit 5 on my keyboard. That's turned my opacity to 50%. And I'm going to carry on doing exactly what I was just doing. But now that I've got a 50% opacity layer, it is giving me a much softer edit. So everything that I go over will be softened. And as I don't need to keep lots of texture in this background, this will work absolutely fine for just removing those extra creases. One of those things you can't really help. Sometimes your background's on its last legs. I work with dancers. My backgrounds get mullered all the time. As soon as you bought a new one, you're already needing another, and you can't always anticipate when that's going to happen. It just takes one slip of a point shoe, and you've wrecked an entire set of your background. Now, yep, they're on paper rolls, which is great because we can roll out the next bit, but it is incredible how fast that roll runs out. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's one reason I actually like working with flooring as well. I like working with actual flooring because, here we go, when I work with actual flooring, firstly, you haven't got the infinity issue anyway, but the dancers have better grip, and it just, overall, the whole thing works a bit better. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to Control E to flatten my layer. You can keep it if you want, but the changes you were doing to the background, I don't see why you'd want to go back. So I flatten my layer on that. Now I've got a few more patchy bits up here that are even showing even with that. So I'm just doing my last refinement. Sometimes with these things, it is just rinse and repeat to go over it when you've got to clean up a background. There we go. Okay, so let's do our flooring. There's lots of little puncture holes. Again, dancers, believe it or not, there's heels and point shoes, and they make all kinds of marks and things on the floor. So we're going to duplicate our layer with Control J. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up to Filter, to Noise and Dust and Scratches. And it's going to smooth everything out here. Now, if I bring my threshold up, you'll see I'll get lots more detail. And radius down, it's going to not stretch as far over the effect. So what I'm probably looking for is a reasonable radius, and bringing that threshold, I would imagine around 3, 4, or 5. Do you know what? Might be lower than that. Let's take that radius down. I think we can get away with 2. And what we're looking for here is the texture. Let's turn the preview on and off. Texture to stay the same. So it's going to be hard to see on the video, but the pixels are staying roughly the same, but the marks and the scratches are vanishing. So I think we need to go up to 3. Yeah, I've got just enough texture there now. And there's just a little mark on the floor I must have missed. Then I'm going to add a mask, Control I to invert the mask, and I can just draw over all the marks. Now, where you're going to have trouble is when you get close to the feet here. The best thing you can do when you get close to those feet is do the whole thing again, but do it on a smaller radius and then mask the smaller radius layer in, and then you should have a lot better sort of edit around. Now you want to look for when it creates weird artifacts. Now you can see it's done it in the middle here. If I zoom in, you can see if I take this off, that texture was actually kind of fine, but as I've added it on, that effect's gone a bit horrible and weird. So you want to keep an eye out for that. You're sort of making sure that it's doing the best job and it's not making your image all weird. I always say that this is a technique, but this is also kind of a cheat. And if you're going to cheat it, you need to check it. That's what we always say. Bring that in. Ooh, that's horrible. Okay, so that's smoothed out that floor quite a lot. I'm going to You can keep this layer if you want to keep this layer. I'm flattening as I go for these because I'm going to add a bit more blending and things on top. But that's only because I'm happy with what I've done, and I'm not going to be going back over my dust and scratches layer around the edges because I could see where it was affecting. So, and all I'm doing is I've got another soften layer, and I'm just softening around again with this. Now, obviously, I could save a lot of time if I had a new background. I'm sure there'll be a comment about that somewhere. But, you know, like I say, it's not always the case. We don't always have it. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to change my composition now. But funny thing is, I actually really like this composition now that we've edited it. Now, I usually change things to square. It's just my kind of preference. But I'm going to go to a 10:8 kind of ratio, which is what this already is, pretty much. And let's try a square. Let's have a go. I always end up preferring a square. It's just my personal preference. Okay, so I like that. I like her sitting. Ooh. I like her sitting about there. Content aware fill as my fill option. Tick that. Let's see what mess it makes of that. Sometimes with more intricate lighting, it doesn't do very well on the edges. But we will see what it does. I'm going to add a bit more definition in the lighting anyway. Yeah, that's actually done quite a good job. I take it back, Photoshop. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to just duplicate my layer so that I can tone this down if I want to. With my burn tool on mid-tones at 20%, I am just drawing in this little gap here just to tone this bit down, because what I'm liking is I'm liking the spotlight kind of look coming down these sides. I kind of like that. And I'm then going to go on my dodge tool and just brighten up this side of the spotlight. My spotlight was coming from the edge, so there was a bit that kind of was falling out, and I just wanted a bit more punch into that. And I can play with these on here. Much better. Perfect. Okay, happy with that. Let's zoom in. I'm happy with those layers. Now I'm going to change that little bit of hair here. There is really not very much needs to be done on skin. I'm just removing a few. Now, one thing I am going to want to remove is this hair. There's one solid hair is kind of irritating. Let's just try and content aware, see what it does. It's mucked up the lip a little bit. We can get that back with our history brush. No, we can't because we changed the crop. There we go. Let's go back and we'll do it with a clone stamp. This is why I always teach the tools and not, this is how you remove hair. Because if I teach you the tools, when it doesn't work, for whatever reason it doesn't work, you've got the option and the ability to come back and attack it from a different angle. There we go. Perfect. That's a few little bits of dust on the hat. Brilliant. Let's have a look. Loving that. Now, no contour, nothing I need to do on there. There's a little bit of flare on that. That's a bit annoying. Get that. Okay, love it. So, last thing I'm going to do is, well, sort of last thing. Never is the last thing when I say that. We're going to hit the adjustment. We're going to go on gradient. And we're going to go to radial. And I will reverse that. And let's play with that a little bit. Bring the scale out. Just so it's doing a bit more. Now, yep, it's on blue at the moment. I'm not going to want it on blue, but we can change that quite easily. I haven't got it in there, so let's change that. Double click and click on my little slider down here and make that black. Okay. So let's play with that scale a bit more. Okay. Still got a blue tint, I must have missed. But that's pulled it in a little bit, that's perfect. Let's work out. And blue tint's in the highlights. Stupid. There we go. Sorry for the delay as I was working that out. Going, where's that gone? that's added our little bit of a radial kind of glow around there. And last thing is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on color balance in my shadows. For this one, I'm deciding on blues and yellows. So I'm going to go into my blues, into my highlights then, add the yellow, add a little bit of red, back to my shadows, add a little bit more blue, and I just find that balance of where I like it. I'm going to turn that on and off. That looks awesome. That looks really cool. So that's just a shot from one of our workshops, and I absolutely love it. So I don't want to add any more texture. I don't want to add anything else. I think the simplicity of this shot is what's nice about it. I think that's all it really needs. So thank you for joining me. I hope it's been helpful, and I will see you next time.